So welcome everyone. We're having a very lovely weekend here in the Metro DC Metro area. Hope it's good where you are if you're outside of the area. I know some of you are. So welcome to our Sunday morning meditation class. I'm Hugh Byrne and I'm a teacher with Center for Mindful Living and Insight Meditation Community of Washington. And I've been teaching with IMCW for over 20 years and with CML since we started. I think it was about 2011. We used to have a space in Northwest DC, but now we're virtual in terms of a lot of our activities, but also a lot more growing number of live activities, including the Saturday morning class in Tenleytown, just a few blocks from where we had our center, the Center for Mindful Living, the physical space. We're now the classes are at Iona, just by Tenley Metro. And so welcome everyone. I hope your weekend is going well, and hope you're keeping well in these challenging times. Just a little bit about the format of the class. We normally begin with a period of guided meditation, about 20 minutes or so. Then Emily leads us in some mindful movement. We'll have a talk. So today, the theme is engaging with compassion and living with joy in difficult times. I'll be talking about the path of the bodhisattva, and then we'll have hopefully a little time for sharing questions, etc. So we'll begin in a moment. I'll just say a couple of words about the meditation. The invitation in our meditation practice is really to meet whatever is arising in the body and in the heart and in the mind with an attitude of kindness and acceptance. The term I like is to bring a non-controlling attitude to whatever is coming up. We're not trying, in this mindfulness practice, we're not trying to necessarily develop particular states or cultivate particular qualities. We can do that in different kinds of meditation, like loving kindness meditation or equanimity or compassion, whatever. But in the basic mindfulness practice, we're just taking our experience, how we are, how things are right now, as they are, take them as they are, and not trying, really letting go of the kind of controls, like feeling I should be feeling that, I shouldn't be feeling this, I'd like more of this, I'd like less of that, and to just open as fully as we can to what's arising moment to moment. So with that, I just invite you to come into a posture that's comfortable and relaxed. It's obviously helpful to begin, by setting the stage to be as relaxed and comfortable as we can be. If we're in a contorted position, it's obviously going to be more challenging for us to just open to what's arising. So just finding a posture that's relaxed and comfortable, letting your back be straight, letting your chest be open so you can breathe easily. You might close your eyes if that's comfortable, or if you prefer, you can just keep your eyes open with a soft gaze, looking a few feet ahead of you. letting your attention come inward, dropping down out of the thinking mode where we spend so much of our time, and just come into feeling your body, feeling the sensations of contact with the surface beneath you, your buttocks, your thighs with the cushion or chair, your hands with your lap or your knees or whatever they're touching, your feet with the floor. And just opening to sensations of the body. You might bring awareness to your breathing. Just notice how it is right now. Letting the breath be relaxed and easy. You might find it helpful to take a few longer, deeper breaths. A nice full deep in breath, filling the lungs, filling the chest. And then releasing, letting go on the out breath. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. Whenever you're ready, just letting the breath come back to its natural rhythm. Just breathing in and breathing out. As we begin the meditation, you might do a practice or two to gladden the mind, to just create a sense of gladness or happiness or joy. You might just take a moment to think of some things you feel grateful for. And just let yourself appreciate them. So many things we easily take for granted. People in our lives, the air we breathe, loved ones. Our religious or spiritual practice. Just letting your attention rest on some things that you appreciate, you feel grateful for. If you can touch into the gladness that comes with that, with the things and the people we appreciate. You might consciously invite a smile or a half smile to your face, to the corners of your eyes, the corners of your mouth. the smile, send a message to our brain and to our nervous system that we can relax and be at ease. Maybe feeling too, practicing with others, supporting each other in our practice. Just opening to whatever is present for you right now in the body. Just let the sensations and feelings, whatever you notice, let them come, let them be. And when they're ready, let them go. Make space too for whatever emotions or mind states might be present right now. Just let yourself feel there's some sadness. Allow yourself to just bring awareness to where you're feeling it. Let the sensations come and go, meeting what's here with kindness, with acceptance. If it's helpful, you might just let your attention rest on your breathing as a kind of anchor for your awareness, just grounding you in the present. The sensations of breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, knowing that you're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing that you're breathing out. Whenever you notice your attention has gone off into thinking, planning, daydreaming, remembering, worrying, whatever it is, just begin again. Come back to the body and the breath. Beginning again in any moment. Not needing to judge yourself going off into thought. And if you do, just see if you can meet the judgment with kindness. Can this moment be a moment of peace, of presence, of freedom? Poet Dorothy Hunt says peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. beginning again in any moment. In breath and out breath. We'll finish off with this prayer of Shantideva. Shantideva was an 8th century Buddhist monk and philosopher and poet, and wrote a book called The Way of the Bodhisattva. He says, "May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those in the dark, and a servant to all those in need, as long as living beings exist and suffering afflicts them. May I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge, for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened." Just taking your time to come back, open your eyes, come back into the group. Thank you. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you how difficult do you find the kind of the time, the period that we're living in right now? You know, if you wanted to put it in the chat, or just say, you know, just where you are on that. You know, I find talking to people that you know, in classes and teaching, that there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of worry. I think we talked just before we started about helplessness. You know, other emotions, there can be a lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of grief, all of these, you know, curious about any thoughts. Nu says 8, Sharon 8, Mark 7, because practice helps, otherwise it would be a 9. Well said, Mark. Pam 9, if 10 is most difficult. Jan 8, 9 for anticipation and dread, 7 for close by impact. Ellie 8.5, but also 5 from time to time. That's well put. Both and Rob 8, Emily 7 with my practice, Suman 5, Karen 9, Maureen 6 to 9.5. I think that's kind of a varied thing. Terry 8, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, from talking and teaching over, the last, well, particularly in this last 8 months, but over the last few years, there's a lot that can bring up anger in us, that can bring up grief, that can bring up fear about where things are going and what's going to happen or what might happen. Sometimes it can be despair, helplessness, and our practice, just the practice is the practice that we were doing earlier in the meditation, can be very, very helpful to us if, just by turning our attention to our experience. If we are, angry about, feeling a lot of anger towards a particular politician, for example, or a political party or whatever, we can, and if that feels, it feels difficult or challenging to feel that way, it might be hatred, for example, that we can turn our attention towards that experience and maybe notice how much of our suffering comes from the story we're telling ourselves, that this person should be different, they shouldn't be doing this, they're a bad person. And that if we were to let go of that story, those beliefs in our minds, we could maybe see, yeah, something harmful might be happening, but we might not need to personalize it so much to make it this bad person doing bad things. Similarly with fear, we might be, if we turn our attention towards our experience, we could see that, fear is about the future. It's about a story we're telling ourselves about what could happen, what might happen in the future. If we're talking about being, a car coming towards us at great speed and the fear arising, well, that's obviously, very real, present moment fear. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about, what will happen if this happens, if they continue to do this, if the elections turn out, blah, 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 all of that. And those, seeing how much suffering can come from those mental mental projections, basically those kind of thoughts and beliefs about the future, we can begin to untangle ourselves from the suffering we experience. Similarly, if we're feeling stressed out by, everything that's happening, again, that stress is about stories, beliefs, things we're telling ourselves about the future. And that simply coming back to the present moment is really an antidote to, to fear, to anger, to, debilitating grief, to stress, worry, all of these expressions really of suffering. So we talk about, in that's the basic kind of teaching, that we can untangle ourselves from suffering by turning towards our experience and being present with what is, being present with, the tension in the body, being aware of the stories in the mind without kind of, following them wherever they go. In that way, we can kind of, it's like we're climbing down from something we've climbed up on, that we're going to fall off of. We can kind of find our way kind of climbing off the precipice, as it were. And that's, that's the heart of really of our practice. We can also cultivate compassion towards those who are suffering, and even including towards those who are causing harm. We can hold them in our hearts. We can cultivate loving kindness, equanimity, cultivating qualities that allow us to meet whatever is coming up in our experience with balance, with steadiness, with equanimity. So all of these are very powerful ways of living in difficult times with some balance and with a sense of ease and a relative well-being, that we don't have to be kind of tossed around by the conditions of life. Oh, he's done that again, so therefore we get kind of get really angry, or we get really fearful, and all of that. So that's kind of the basic, as Ram Dass would call it, the basic curriculum. There's the basic practice, the curriculum that we have to deal with suffering. It's the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, and how we can untangle ourselves from suffering by seeing how much we create our own suffering by, as the Buddha said, by craving and by clinging. And that we can untangle ourselves. We have this capacity. I want to talk today, though, about a more specific, and in some ways a more radical, I don't want to say more radical practice. I mean, that's a radical, letting go of suffering is as radical as you can get. But in a way, in terms of how much it kind of turns things on their head, in a way, this, I think, is a very radical practice, and that's the practice of the path or the way of the bodhisattva. And I want to talk about that a little bit today, and just say, I'll begin just by saying what is a bodhisattva? Bodhisattva, it's kind of sounds like a very esoteric thing, a very Buddhist-y thing, but it's once we unpack it, it's a very, very powerful, you might say, archetype, ideal that we can live into. That's kind of what the theme I want to get across, what I want to get across today, that this ideal of the bodhisattva is something that we can live ourselves into, that we can embody ourselves in our own lives and in our own practice. So just to take the word bodhisattva, it comes from two words. Bodhi means awakening, same root as the Buddha, the awakened one. Same root, interestingly, for linguists as the word bud. Flowers bud, and we bud, we awaken. That BUD is obviously Proto-Indo-European for the linguists, or at least way back in some 3,000-4,000 years ago. So awakening, bodhi, awakening, and sattva is a being. It's an awakening being, or an awakened being, one who is already awakened or one who is on the path of awakening. And historically, the term, at the time of the Buddha, the term, in the Buddha's original teachings, the bodhisattva referred to the Buddha before he became a Buddha. It was the bodhisattva was the, in the cosmology, it's all the previous lives, and including the life when he was Siddhartha, the story of being wealthy and then going off and becoming a beggar, a wandering monk. He was called, in the scriptures, as it were, in the teachings there, he's called a bodhisattva until he becomes, he has the experience of awakening under the tree. So until then, he's a bodhisattva. But the way this term has been developed mainly comes about 500 years after the Buddha's life, so about 2000 years ago. And it comes out of, this is kind of, you don't need to know this, it won't be on the exam, but it's kind of inside baseball. But after the Buddha dies, a lot of different kind of groupings develop with different kinds of analysis of the teachings, different kinds of views of the teachings. It's interesting, Buddhism isn't a kind of a sectarian religion that doesn't tend to, or hasn't over the last 2,500 years, gone, break off into new sects like Protestantism and Christianity and stuff like in that, the Tibetans and the Thais and the Burmese and etc., the different, expressions of Buddhism, Zen and insight, and Tibetan Buddhism still all see themselves as part of, this Dharma path. Again, though, this is all to the side, but the conception of the bodhisattva as a being who has awakened but chooses to stay in the realm of suffering. The term is samsara, which means endless wandering. We can keep wandering because we keep doing things over and over again. This concept of the bodhisattva was really a reaction against what was felt to be an overly individualized view of liberation. That's really, those who developed this bodhisattva idea or archetype were reacting against the sense of seems too much about me waking up or you waking, the individual waking up. And it was really a kind of bringing more fully into the picture, I would say, compassion towards all beings, seeing it much more as in a sense, as a collective, a process awakening. It's not just about, a few very advanced spiritual practitioners waking up and being there and being teachers and sharing the word. Not limited to that, but that our awakening, this is the kind of what's embodied in this view, our awakening is inexorably tied up with the awakening of all beings. And so this very kind of selfless view of the bodhisattva is, that the person does everything they can, does all the work that they need to do to awaken themselves, but chooses to stay in the realm of suffering until all beings are liberated. So it's this very, very selfless emphasis on the awakening of all beings, on this, we're all inexorably tied to each other. Our well-being is dependent on the well-being of everyone. I can't be happy, truly happy, if you are suffering. And you can be anybody, you could be in Gaza, or you could be in Sudan, or you could be in, Thailand, or whatever, you could be anywhere. But if you're suffering, then in some way, we're all suffering. And so, we're all inexorably tied to each other. That beautiful, quote from Martin Luther King, in this, bound together in this, this, I can't remember the exact quote, but, this network of kind of connectedness. And this is the conception really of the bodhisattva, that originally, staying in the realm of suffering until all beings are awakened. And the and at its at its core, it's really the intention of alleviating suffering wherever it's found. So it's obviously we need to wake up ourselves. We need to see where we're clinging, where we're caught up in suffering. We have to do our work, but our work is completely tied to the well-being of others, of well-being of all other beings. So it's very much this focus on alleviating suffering. There's one of the different ways that the vow, it's about making a commitment to our own awakening and to the awakening of all beings. And it's often framed in very, what's the word I look for? Very almost heroic kind of terms, probably one of the most familiar expressions of this vow is, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to eradicate them all. The gates of the Dharma are limitless. I vow to enter them all. The Buddha's way is inconceivable. I vow to attain it. So it's this kind of very, it kind of is, the language is kind of somewhat heroic, but it's really not meant in a kind of like, I'm going to be the one, which would be completely contradictory to the sense of the bodhisattva. But it's just really expressing that depth of commitment to not just our own awakening, but the well-being of everybody. And this is, I think, for me, is a really beautiful thing about this, the practice of the bodhisattva, being a bodhisattva, becoming a bodhisattva. Pema Chodron has a book based on Shantideva. That quote I finished the meditation with, Becoming Bodhisattvas, Pema Chodron, and it's a lovely book. It's a little on the esoteric side compared with a lot of inside Tibetan Buddhism, but very, very rich as well. Most of her books are small and very pithy and to the point. This one is more grounded in the Buddhist, the Tibetan Buddhist cosmology, but a lovely book as well. So at the heart of this vow is the commitment, is the intention of alleviating suffering, a commitment to the happiness and well-being of all. And so the bodhisattva vision really is, it represents an archetype. It's kind of something that, it's an ideal that we can work towards. And we can choose to be bodhisattvas. We choose to see everybody as deserving of our compassion. Even the people we might dislike most in the world are still worthy of our, it's necessary, it's essential if we're going to free ourselves, that we see the goodness in everybody, that all beings have the capacity to awaken and all deserve our compassion and our loving kindness. And so we can choose to become bodhisattvas. It doesn't mean that we're perfect or that we never make mistakes, but that we commit to this path of wisdom and compassion. As I said, seeing that all beings have the capacity to awaken and all deserve our compassion and loving kindness. We can live into this ideal of the bodhisattva. So if you just think about it, what would it mean? What would it mean to be a bodhisattva, to commit to the bodhisattva path? I think one of the things it means is to see everybody as an awakening being. So to see those who are causing harm as deserving of our compassion and of our kindness. Not to deny the harm that they're causing, not to say, and not to not do what we need to do to resist that, but nonetheless to see, to include them, to have no animosity or hatred towards any beings. I want to talk about that more in a minute when I talk about some expressions of people who lived out this bodhisattva path or ideal. But just before that, I want to say that some of the characteristics of a bodhisattva, Jack Cornfield, in his book The Wise Heart, which is about teachings of both Western and Buddhist psychology, wonderful book. He highlights 3 qualities of a bodhisattva. The first one is that the bodhisattva takes their stand on the ground of how things are, how things are, rather than, in wishful thinking or in denial or in saying this shouldn't be happening right now. We shouldn't be living in a time when people are being so cruel, for example. And then we act as though, because we think it shouldn't be happening, it's almost like it's not happening, or we're not engaging with how it's happening, and we're not, dealing with it. It's essential that we take our stand and we choose our actions and our thoughts, our words, our deeds, based on what is real, what's actual, what's happening. So right now, if we think the society, the political situation in the country is a 9 or an 8.5 or a 9.5, this is where we take our stand. We say, this is, I accept that this is how things are right now. Nelson Mandela, when he was in Robben Island in prison for 21 years, when he got in there, a lot of people got in, were angry about, the injustice of being, sent to prison for trying to, struggle for a free and equal society. But what he did, he accepted the truth of here I am, and here I'm likely to be, and I may well die in prison, but I'm going to do everything I can from this place to bring about change. And that's what he did, and in an incredible way. Martin Luther King took his stand in the segregated Jim Crow society of America as it was 60, 50 years ago, and how it had been from slavery to Jim Crow. He didn't deny that what was going on or wish it were different than it was, but said, this is how things are. We have to engage with reality as we find it. And that's what he did. And that's what the Bodhisattva does. There's some of you may probably familiar with, some of us of a certain age, maybe familiar with Carlos Castaneda's books on Don Juan and you know, there's a lot of controversy around him, but he said a lot of wise things. But anyway, in his Don Juan, in one of the books, he speaks about a spiritual warrior. There's another word for a bodhisattva, as a spiritual warrior. A spiritual warrior takes everything as a challenge. He said, the ordinary person takes everything as a blessing or a curse. You know, that like, oh, this is wonderful. Oh, this is terrible. Whereas the bodhisattva or the spiritual warrior says, this is what's here right now. How do I engage with reality as it is right now? How do I, you know, how do I engage with, you know, let me just get political, but not in a political way, but in a humanitarian way. You know, I'm working, and many of us are working on, you know, particularly around, you know, the cruelty, you know, opposing the cruelty of our neighbors and friends being picked up by armed and masked agents on the streets, and, you know, taken away where their family don't know where they are, and, you know, sometimes sent off to countries they've never lived in before. You know, putting aside the politics of this is cruelty, and it's inhuman and inhumane. But one can respond to that and say, this is what's happening. What can I do about it? How can I help? How can I do something about it? Or we could just say, you know, these are terrible people doing these terrible things. They're awful. And we could spend our time complaining about it. And the second way, that second way of complaining, is we're not dealing with the reality. We're dealing with the story in our head about how bad people are, and we're creating separation. If we can engage with what's happening without turning the people that are doing it into enemies, but to see, you know, there's ignorance, yes, there's not seeing our interconnectedness, not seeing each other's humanity, that's the ground for this cruelty, but not to turn anybody into an enemy. This is kind of the heart of the bodhisattva practice, to engage, to act, to do what we can to alleviate suffering, but to do it without causing, without creating differences, without, you know, creating, you know, hatred towards quote the other. There's a very well-known quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, where he says, "I've seen too much hate to want to hate. And every time I see it, I say to myself, hate is too great a burden to bear. Somehow we must be able to stand up against our most bitter opponents and say, we will match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we will still love you. But be assured that we'll wear you down by our capacity to suffer, and one day we will win our freedom. We will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will appeal to your heart and conscience. So appeal to your heart and conscience that we will win you in the process, and our victory will be a double victory." You know, think of that, the difference between that and what is typical, you know, most people is like, they're doing bad things, they're bad people. And we create this other, this, you know, Tara Brach speaks about the unreal other. You know, they lose their humanity because we kind of like, oh, it's them out there. And whenever we do that, I mean, it's, you know, that's been the basis for genocides. You know, it's them. They don't deserve to live. They're not even human. You know, in the Rwandan genocide, you know, the term that was used about the Tutsi, you know, by the leaders of the, you know, the government, the Hutu government, was cockroaches. You know, when you can see somebody as a cockroach, it's not very hard to go from there to killing them. Like, you know, that's typically what people do, you know, when they find a cockroach. So, and this is the complete opposite. This is, you know, this is love your neighbor, love your enemy, love your opponent, and you know, win a double victory by, you know, by being willing to see them as, you know, as part of the beloved community, as the term Martin Luther King often used. So that's the first quality, to take our stand on reality as it is, not the stories in the mind, not wishful thinking. The second quality is to find freedom, that bodhisattva finds freedom within themselves, you know, and that's, you know, what our practice of abandoning what's unskillful and cultivating the good, you know, abandoning qualities and thoughts and actions that lead us to suffering. You know, see when that we're doing that, of like, oh, if I'm complaining or I'm blaming or I'm judging, you know, that's just another way of suffering. You know, I'm creating separation, I'm creating division. So to see that and to let go of that, and to cultivate the good, to cultivate kindness and compassion and generosity, gratitude, equanimity. So transforming ourselves as we connect with and work to alleviate suffering. The third quality of the bodhisattva Jack talks about is the bodhisattva envisions a path of freedom for themselves, their community, and their world. He says, envisioning has enormous power. With our vision and imagination, we can help create the future. Envisioning sets our direction, marshals our resources, makes the unmanifest possible. So this quality of seeing, what is it we need to do? What is it we need to do to free all beings, but to free, you know, in a specific, you know, for Martin Luther King, it was to free African Americans from segregation. But even that was only a part of a bigger vision of helping free us all, so that we could all live in the beloved community where everybody is respected, everybody lives lives of dignity. You know, that so that vision, you know, what needs to be done? You know, what can I do to help serve in this way, to help bring people together, to help build the beloved community? You know, the archetype of the bodhisattva is very much a Buddhist archetype. But what's wonderful, I find, about the bodhisattva archetype is that we can see people in so many different traditions who are bodhisattvas. You know, that we could think of, you know, I mentioned Nelson Mandela in his prison cell on Robben Island. You could think of Gandhi, you know, in India. You know, his vision, he took, you know, India as it was under colonialism. He did his own work to free himself from suffering. And he envisioned a path to independence and freedom for the people. You know, independence was a political expression, but really freedom for the Indian people from the yoke of colonialism. We can think of you know, people like Dorothy Day, who founded the Catholic worker movement, you know, soup kitchens in major cities and the Depression. You know, you can think of Jane Goodall, you know, that you know, who is the bodhisattva, and whose understanding of a bodhisattva was not just human beings, but all sentient beings. You know, that all all beings deserved respect, care, dignity, to be able to live a life as free of suffering as possible. Joanna Macy, a wonderful Buddhist teacher and ecologist who died just a couple of months ago as well. For me, probably more than anybody else, I think Martin Luther King. I mean, there's obviously the Buddhist examples, the Dalai Lama, the Thich Nhat Hanh, wonderful expressions of bodhisattva action and commitment. But in many ways, I think, the clearest example for me is Martin Luther King. If you I just share a couple more quotes from him. He, as you know, that at the heart of the civil rights movement was the practice of nonviolence. Nonviolence, and what he emphasized was nonviolence isn't just not physically harming your opponent, but it's really cultivating nonviolence of the heart, inner nonviolence, and that really means that's really love of one's enemy. He spoke about how the goal of the civil rights movement and the leadership had to be not to, quote, defeat the white man, but to win his friendship and understanding. We must make it clear that it is injustice which we seek to defeat, and not persons who happen to be unjust. We have before us the glorious opportunity to inject a new dimension of love into the veins of our civilization. Our motto must be freedom and justice through love, not through violence, not through hate. No, not even through boycotts, but through love. He speaks about boycotts. He said sometimes we need to use boycotts, but boycotts are not an end in themselves. They're merely a means towards an end, to wake up the oppressor and challenge their false sense of superiority. But he says the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. So this is the vision that he was moving towards, or that the civil rights movement was really founded on, was this larger vision of creating the beloved community. And I think that this represents, in the clearest way possible, the bodhisattva path, and how we can engage, and how it will serve us in this current period of history to respond to the conditions that we're faced with. Because we need to resist. We need to resist cruelty, inhumanity, injustice. It's absolutely appropriate to do that. But if we do it from a place of violence, we create more violence, and then things just spiral into ever greater violence. If we do it from a place of hatred and othering, then we only create more separation and more division. Even if we, quote, win on that basis, then we've created, as, if we look at the history of the Middle East over the last 100 years, how much suffering has come from this othering of not being able to see one people, not being able to see another people. And being caught up in the righteousness of one's own struggle, and again, I'm not getting in, obviously, getting into the depths of that and the complexity of that, but there is a truth in that othering just creates more and more basis for future conflict. So what would it mean to embody this? I mean, I just ask as a reflection, really, for you, can you envision this being in this period that we're in right now, in your life as you're living it right now, but choosing this path of the bodhisattva, this path where no one is the enemy? And you think sometimes, well, if we don't have enemies, will I have the juice or the impetus to continue to struggle? But I think in practice, it becomes even clearer that when we get out of that enemy mentality, that there's much more space and much more energy to engage with and resist things that are wrong, because we don't have almost that friction, really, that we add on when we get into the othering. It's this add-on that doesn't actually serve us. It's just another expression of suffering. So what I'm saying here is really just an invitation to explore and think about. I have to say, for myself, it's been very, very freeing. Even though things are objectively much harder, I think probably almost everyone here would agree, harder under Trump 2.0 than it was under Trump 1.0. It somehow looks almost benign looking back compared with things as they are now. That's my view of it. And yet, one of the things I don't claim to have done it 100%, but it's qualitatively different. I have very little, of the personal animosity and anger and all of those things towards the people that are doing what they're doing. I think it's based on a complete ignorance of, what is helpful, what is necessary for us to live together. It misses everything that's important there, but it's not bad people doing bad things. It's ignorance. And if we can see, I found it just a much greater freedom and a much more space to actually be involved and to get involved without those additional, because really second arrows and third arrows when we add on the bad people doing bad things. So, just an invitation to reflect on that and to explore, what would it mean for you? And maybe you're already, in that place.